Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
I'm Richard Dolan. This is my beautiful wife, Tracy.
Hi, everybody.
Beautiful and
Thank
brilliant.
you.
Welcome to the latest edition of Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. Very happy to be with you again this week. Notice we have a new and improved webcam video resolution.
It was looking a little rough there before.
It was. We have improved it. So I'm glad we're doing this again, and hopefully we can begin to move past some of the drama that has infested, taken over the field of ufology, UFO research, and the alternative media in general. Let's face it, this is a field that loves to eat its own. And do we really need to be doing that? So why don't we move back to the main line? As the great King Oliver once said to a young trumpet cornet player by the name of Louis Armstrong, he said, "Kid, stick to the main line." In other words, don't get cute. Know what your goal is. And for us, the goal is the substance. It's the subject, and it's all the things that actually are of great importance in this world. And it's really exploring the issues that brought us all together in the first place. So how about we go back to that? That's my vote. What about you?
That sounds great to me.
All righty.
I'm sure it sounds great to everybody.
I would think so. In a moment, I'm going to talk about what I've been calling the control system. I think there is a system in control. It's actually existed for all of human history, but it's modern. It's modernized. But before we get into that, I think we want to do one quick little update.
Things. Yeah. First of all, we have a newsletter now, and you can sign up for that if you're interested. It's free. It comes out weekly, and it's on richarddolanmembers.com on the main welcome page, or on Richard's Facebook page, Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. And we basically let you know everything that's happened over the week. It's got all of the free content, all the members' content, all of Richard's upcoming appearances. We just decided to put a little bit of fan art in there. And, we try to keep it interesting. So we try to fill it with some new things. It's brand new, but...
fundamentally, I mean, I've been very busy this year. Anyone who's followed me knows there's a lot of activity coming out of this house, this room. And so I think it's appropriate that we just create a weekly newsletter, just to give an update of everything that we've been up to, and articles that I've been writing for the Richard Dolan Members site, or video or audio things that I put together, and that includes this program and everything else that we're involved in doing. So it's free just to go, keeps you updated on what we're up to. And there's a lot of subscribers already in just a couple of weeks. So it's growing. And
go ahead.
Well, just you can go to Richard Dolan Members, and it's just an easy, quick, free sign up. And I would say, by all means, if you're interested, there you go.
Yeah, and I was wondering if you might want to just tell people, I'm sure a lot of people here already know, but just tell people how you've reorganized your week, because you used to do the 2-hour Richard Dolan show.
Yeah, for years and years. Thanks for asking that. So for many years, I did a 2-hour Richard Dolan show on KGRA radio. Starting in 2011, I believe was the first year I did that, possibly 2012, I think 2011, long time. And I have loved and still love doing that program. I still do the Richard Dolan show. It still airs on KGRA radio. But I will just say, so that format for many years was basically, I would occasionally have a guest on. And for most of the time, though, I would just do a 2-hour me solo show for the world. And I would talk about the things that I'm interested in, that I consider important, whether it's UFO research, geopolitics, false flags, a lot of geopolitics, and then a lot of philosophy, a lot of future tech. And this year, I've just, it really started with the decision that I made earlier this year to redo things. So that show is now interview only. And that's really all I've done this year on the Richard Dolan show, is just interviews of other people. And I very much prefer that. It's been a very positive experience. And then, of course, because I still like doing solo work. And so for that, we have this live stream, the Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure, And then on Saturdays, I do UFOs, the Big Picture. And that's usually a shorter thing. So I feel like that these two shows, these two live streams, are essentially the continuation of all the solo material that I've always wanted to do. And the Richard Dolan show is basically an interview format show. And that is now 1 hour on KGRA. And if you want the second hour, you can always go to the member site, Richard Dolan members, and you can, if you're a member of the site, it's easy. And if you are very interested in the second hour, you can always sign up for a membership. And that's really just how it is. So
I just wanted to clarify that because some people had, weren't happy that you had, moved the second hour.
No, they're like, you sold out, man.
But I just wanted you to have a chance to explain that you just moved your content because you're putting out more content than you ever have. So
absolutely. And I mean, it's great. I actually love this. I'm more engaged in doing this work than I have ever been, maybe since I started researching UFOs 20, 25 years ago. Other than that, I feel fantastic, and I love doing the things that we're doing. I love doing these programs. So yeah, someone or a couple of people I think were not happy that the second hour of the Richard Dolan show, the interviews that I do, are on my website. Look, just deal with it. Okay, it's life. We're all grown-ups. You can deal with it. If you really like it that much, you can join, and there's a lot of other valuable stuff there. And if you don't have to. The first hour is always great. I did a fantastic interview that just aired with Micah Hanks. Micah's a wonderful researcher, brilliant person. We had a great first hour and a fantastic second hour. And that's what I intend to do every week. So that's how it is. The new order.
And we mentioned before that we had David Paulides coming up that we're really excited about, but we actually had to move that back a little bit. So that will be coming up probably in the next couple of weeks.
Well, it's happening. I just corresponded with David. We're on board. I think we're going to do it. We'll record it, I think, before the week is out, and we'll find a time very soon to air that. I feel that he's a very important researcher. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know who David Paulides is, you want to know who he is, and we'll get that interview out. There's lots. He's done a lot of work out there already. Lots of excellent books in the 4-1 missing person series. Not ordinary missing person cases. No, not by any means. These are really, really extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And a number of other interviews I've got with UFO researchers from around the world. We'll announce those as we actually wrap them up and nail them down. But I think there's a few good ones that we're probably going to record this week and next week.
Yep.
So we're busy.
I just want to add too that we have sometimes contests that we're running in our newsletters for signed books from Richard and this type of thing. So there's some other fun stuff in there for people.
Bling.
Yeah. But before we start, I just want to say a very special and heartfelt thank you to Michael and Lori of Pursuing X. We could not do everything we do without you guys.
Absolutely.
We're so grateful, and thank you for everything.
We really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
So we'll get going. I'm going to leave Richard tonight.
You're going to go?
I'm going to go over here.
I'm going to do. Totally welcome to stay here, but you're going to work over there.
I'm going to do a little bit on chat, but I'm also going to pay attention because I want to come back in at the end because I think this is a really important topic. So,
all right. Well,
hello to everyone. See, there's a whole bunch of people in there. We can't read what you're saying right now, but just want to say hi. I'll be back.
I'm going to slide over here. And you want your chair?
Yeah.
Notice our fancy wooden chairs here with
this
the spindle back. All right. Are you going to, I'll move this over for you there. And how about that? Is that
perfect.
Better?
Yeah.
All right, good. And our fancy studio. So, yeah. By the way, this room has a name, and I'm just going to let you know, this is called the Collab Room, and it's short for collaboration. And just so you know, like, this is where Tracy and I work every day, every single day. I'll sit at this desk. She will sit at this desk, or she'll work there, and we do our work. And we'll be like, I'm in the Collab Room. You want a coffee? I'll bring a coffee in the Collab Room. And this is story of our life. So, okay, I want to talk about something that as I mentioned, I have been calling the control system. And I was thinking about how to start out with this. And I think I'll just say that, I mean, control in human society has always been a very tightly done thing, right? I mean, society today isn't simply controlled and that this is some unique thing. No, I mean, human society has always been a very hierarchical, we could almost say pyramid type of hierarchy, in which this is how people have lived. And it's easy for us to fall into this trap of saying, well, that's evil, and you've always had a few people who control the many, and that's true. But I'm also, I would also say I'm willing to give ancient people a little bit of slack here. Life was very hard in ancient times, and it required, and also societies were not always that large. The most human groupings were way smaller than what we have today. And it's really not surprising, is it, that you would find well-defined roles in human society. Roles for men, roles for women, roles for young men, roles for old men, roles for older women, roles for younger women, roles for kids. Not surprising at all. And that is the nature of human society. And that society, of course, has had controls, systems of control in place so that people do what they either individually or collectively decide they need to do to survive, because survival was never a sure thing in the ancient world. And so we've gone now, we've had 6,000, roughly 6,000 or so years of what we call civilization, maybe a little more, a little less, give or take. And that's how it's been. But we're in a different situation today, and it's a different kind of control situation. And so I'd like to talk about that. When I say control has always been very rigid and hierarchical, just think back, 500 years in European civilization, European society, and think about what life would be like around the year 1500 during the Renaissance. And we think of the Renaissance as a wonderful period of history. It was filled with incredible innovation, art, scientific thinking, proto-scientific thinking, proto-modern philosophical thinking, and all of this. But it still was a very tightly controlled society. And in this case, it was controlled theologically, the Catholic Church and then the various Protestant churches equally controlling the minds of the people in their community through dogma, fear, punishment, and everything else that goes along with it. Very tightly, in fact, so tightly controlled that if you were what was called a free thinker in that era, you had to be secretive. Like, you needed secret handshakes. You needed absolute caution and discretion in finding like-minded people in your society, or otherwise you could literally be put to a stake and be burned alive, which happened every now and then to people who dissented from theological dogma. So what I'm suggesting is that, and I said this last week in my live stream on New Age, the New Age movement, is that the right to have freedom of speech and freedom of thought is a hard-won right and has been paid for by human blood many times over. And we really would do well to remember this in our era today, incidentally, when you've got so many groups that are intent on deplatforming or limiting the freedom of expression of so many other individuals. Freedom of speech is a hard-won, precious, absolute precious commodity in our world. And it's only a recent development when you look at the long history of our society. It's really only in the last 2 centuries, maybe 250 years in Europe. Didn't exist in China, it didn't exist in Africa, didn't exist in anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere other than the United States originally. So it's precious, it's important. So in all of our history, there's always been a power elite. And they have always, in my view, always wanted to live as much like gods as they can. Let's put it that way. So when people have been given the opportunity, they will and have always, and I'm sure will continue to exercise as much absolute draconian power over others as they are permitted to have. Because, my friends, that is how human beings have been, and that is how they are. That is why we have laws to protect minorities from the will of any groups, whether a hierarchy or an oppressive majority. there's always this tendency that people have to abuse their power, always. But something unusual happened in civilization, really starting in Western civilization, about 250 or so years ago. And that was this revolution. It was an intellectual revolution, and it became a scientific revolution, and that became an industrial revolution. And it transformed the world so radically, so dramatically that, I mean, we now take this for granted, but when you take the long view of human history, it's an incredible unleashing of human freedom. That's what this is. So, power elites have always sought to live like gods and have always jealously guarded their prerogatives and power over the little people. Always been the case in all societies. But starting around, let's say 1750 or so, in England and in the American colonies particularly, something new happened. A new system, form of society began developing, and let's call it a society based on free enterprise. And it's very significant indeed. We talk about freedom as being very important. I might suggest that at least one of the top two, or at the most three important of those types of freedoms in this world is the freedom to determine the kind of economic future you want for yourself, the freedom to engage in your pursuit of your choosing. Like, that's important freedom. That's freedom that gives individuals power. And that is the freedom to engage in an enterprise, free enterprise. That's what it's about. And free enterprise societies started in England and in the United States around that time period and revolutionized the world, as we all know. And this system spread throughout Europe and then to much of the rest of the world. And it gave us all of the innovations that we now benefit from in our world today, whether it was Morse code or the railroad back in the 19th century, the steam engine, or the telephone or the automobile or television or radio or air flight, the airplane, and everything else in our world, right down to computers and your smartphone that many of you are holding in your hand. All right, so that is the result of a free enterprise economic system that is a historical anomaly. It has never existed before. And that freedom allowed for the development of what we will call the middle class, a genuine middle class. This is something I've occasionally touched on publicly in the past, but I really want to hammer this home here. The middle class, historically speaking, is another of those anomalies of history. It never really existed. Yes, there were merchants in the Renaissance and before. There was always a tiny little bit of this type of a class. But as a genuine phenomenon, no. The middle class is a distinctly modern phenomenon. And it has transformed our global politics and our global intellectual life. So now, the reason that, looking back, because we're really looking at the ending of the middle class, and we are really looking also at the ending of the genuine free enterprise system. The reason I now believe that system was allowed to flourish as it did was because it benefited not only the general population, which it certainly did, but it benefited those elites at the very top of our power structure and gave them all of those inventions that made their lives easier, just like it made everyone else's lives easier. So their thinking is great. Maybe it's actually a pretty good idea to unleash the freedom and capabilities of those masses of people, give them a certain level of education so that they have good scientific training, and so on and so on and so on. And it creates genuine wealth in the world, which it has done. What I will submit to you is that we may indeed be looking at the end of that era. And that's a bad thing for all of us moving forward. But let me describe, pardon me, why I think we're at the end of this era. Why they at the top no longer need us who are in this very broad, intellectually active middle class of people working and thinking and creating. Um, let's look at computers. Computing technology has so exponentially developed and grown. I mean, there's Moore's law, of course. This simply talks about, technically speaking, the doubling of the number of transistors on an integrated circuit every 1.5 to 2 years in the computing industry. And I believe that is still holding true even after 50 years. But more generally speaking, Moore's law simply refers to the uh, rapid and continual growth of computing power and capability in our world. And that is continuing onward and onward. All right. That includes development of a number of other disruptive forces, such as AI, artificial intelligence. I think we've all been hearing about that. Other types of computing. There's quantum computing and molecular computing. These are revolutionary forms of computation. And they're not, I don't believe they're all fully on board, but they are being developed. Quantum computing, in particular, people have heard a lot about. There's nanotechnology, another disruptive technology. There's the entire realm of robotics. And then we move into 3D printing and 3D scanning and DNA mapping and gene editing and brain mapping. Yes, you heard me, brain mapping. We're now in an era of implants that people will be able to have in the very near future. I mean, actually, we're already starting this era to have greater abilities in different ways, whether it's soon, I'm sure it will be cognitive abilities, but we've got replacement limbs and so forth. But then even more ominous, there's population profiling, including predictive modeling based on your digital footprint on the world, your web and consumer behavior. That is all being tracked, all being tracked. We all know this. Along the lines of surveillance, there's now the ability for a virtual comprehensive facial and voice recognition algorithms that are out there. I don't know if they're all being used all the time, but the capabilities are pretty much there now. And of course, the drones and the insect drones, which how widespread are they? I don't know, but they're out there. So there's all kinds of surveillance that's there. Mind reading technologies, essentially a virtual telepathy, is also coming online. And you're looking at a future. When will it be? 5 years, 10 years from now? Not more than 20 years, when your computer will be telling you that it's a conscious, sentient entity, and you'll believe it because it's going to seem like it. I don't know when that moment's going to come. It's probably going to be way sooner than 20 years, and it could well be sooner than 10. Your guess is as good as mine there, but it's not going to be forever. It's going to happen. So this is the world we're moving into. And, it's an interesting exercise, if you care to combine a number of these technologies that I've just been discussing and ask yourself how they might work together to create new situations in our world. One of the things that's going to be totally clear is a completely comprehensive 24/7 surveillance system over every single person in this world. And just as a very quick aside, thinking about the subject of UFOs, which isn't my main subject for tonight, but as you know, I think about that a lot. And when you think about the theories of what these other beings are like, these gray aliens and the insects type beings that are associated with them, you think of a very telepathic, intensely hierarchical, rule-driven society, which is what they clearly appear to be, where there's no independence of thought, what we can see anyway, uh, little to zero free will, where every being knows the thoughts of every other being. It's a complete totalitarian society in which freedom of will is gone. And whether one believes in that scenario or not, I would just suggest that we in our society are, in fact, moving very much in that direction right now. Uh, with a virtual surveillance of everybody that is coming online and is online. And you can already see that it's affecting the psychology of a lot of people in this world. And it definitely works toward creating a conformist society more and more, because people are just afraid to step out of line due to whether the government coming down on them or just cultural shaming if they say the wrong thing or think the wrong thought. So it's all happening, and we can see this new type of society coming into place. So moving back, though, to the control systems that are in place. In short, I would say the elites, if we can call them that, probably no longer need human societies the way they once did, that were organized around free labor, free enterprise, ingenuity, and creativity. Like for 2 or more centuries, those qualities were valuable to the elites as well as to everyone else. And therefore, that system was permitted, I would say, to flourish. And it's no longer necessary. Why? A, these new technologies that are coming online are primed to replace human intellect, human ingenuity. We have what's called the robo-apocalypse. Terminator's coming to take your job. We have a scientific, let's call them technorati, that will now be increasingly directing scientific breakthroughs for the elite, for them. And this is a very much smaller group of people than a sprawling middle class with geniuses scattered throughout the world. I'm sure there will always be a way to find those geniuses and to bring them into the system to work for the elite. But by and large, it's not going to be as necessary to have this large middle class any longer. The real goal that these elites have always wanted, genetic superiority, they're going to get it. Unbounded luxury, well, they've already got that. And here's the new thing, immortality. And damn if they don't want that, and they're going to do everything they can to get it. All right, with gene editing capabilities, the ability to manipulate and apparently extend the telomeres, which are responsible for most of our aging. Look, they're going to work on it. You think they're going to share that technology with everyone else? You better